I'll to my email and send it to everybody. So I think we're good.
I think he said he sold it and then have insurance.
Not good.
Not good.
Not good at all. Well, let's all get to, man. I'll stop back by.
You never sent me info to post in my neighborhood.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I'll post it.
I mean,
Okay, I appreciate it.
he's only giving me like 1,000 things to hand out now.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
He's trying to get me to do his business farm.
Well,
I mean, it's smart. He's,
obviously, he didn't send me all the stuff, so he's gotta rely on someone else.
bro. That's not more people. Haven't you been having like the same people in class?
Pretty much.
Well, you
We
named
have.
every single one when I'm on shift. I don't get it.
We have a couple that are from outside of the close area, so I knew they were gonna have to Zoom like every single one, but. Yeah,
Oh, there's people from like not around in this area?
yeah. Yeah, there was, I think the majority of them are, but some of them were from, I think there was one in here from ESD 200 or something, I can't remember. for sure.
ESP 200.
Yeah, you know where that is, like, he is a
Waller.
Waller, man.
Yeah, we were just talking about that on the way over here.
Yeah, I had somebody from ESD 200 in my last class also. Our assistant chief retired recently, Chief Al Kurtz,
Yeah,
and then he took a job, kind of like consulting.
he doing their CPA out there.
He's doing their modeling and stuff.
Wildland. Oh, yeah, Chief Parr, his good friend, is their CPA.
Yeah,
It was our old.
yeah, they were kind of in cahoots to do some accounting stuff together.
Yeah, it's, because they were the same, they were, you know, all their CPAs and firemen at first.
Yeah.
Or working with, Rick.
Risk management, is that what they have out there?
Yep.
Is that what we have?
Yeah. For now. Because they're kind of,
Is that who those are? Know that?
Yeah.
They work for Rick.
oh,
I met Wendy and another one.
oh, Monterey, so they work for us.
Who's the other girl that was
That is Adrian Hutchinson. She is the,
there? She works for Rick.
no, she works for us. They're the, she's the financial director and. Yes, I can't remember the title of this. But basically she runs finance and accounting. They're both of us, they're awesome. I love it. Adrian and.
Yeah, no, she was pretty blunt.
So, and then Mama Ray's awesome. She's been around for a while. Apparently, I was really. No, but she carried my mom.
What is Zimbra?
That's our email server.
Started it all. Things get better this evening or this morning.
I think it did. It did, it's just.
I think I still need to have a this evening. Now the tensions are down.
Yeah.
Well, that must be normal.
Yeah.
While you're there, can you ask him if he is in that situation, please?
Last week's also. That I had, yeah. Well, count everybody. Doing. Recall an email. That we sent out that had everybody in it, because I can't remember everybody's email to resend. You know what I guess I could do is just put it back in. Just I can get it from there. And I can text everybody.
So we averaged 29 day and 9 75 days this last month. And we hit 5 people down 11 times throughout the month, so why I mentioned 5, so, over 4. We can put overtime, and typically when we're 5 or more down, there's already overtime people work.
Yeah.
We were only 32 to 32, 6, 9. So we average, it's probably the second day average for the month, not a truly weekly, 41 openings a week. Out of these openings, ish.
Cause we'll
And
have,
I also-
have 3 firemen, knows it. And so
Yes.
one on a shift completely by himself.
Correct. So this is what is gonna take out of this. And cause I don't count Frederick into that because he's already working 4 more 50 people. So this is the interesting data that I'm really pushing hard on. So we had 213 shifts filled with write-ups last month.
Even though they just promoted 8.
And I know, because, so we had a count on fire for 57.1% of the time and had write-ups 42.9. So my thought, so we had 5 or more guys writing up 25 days, and we had 8 or more guys writing up 12 days. So so 8 is important because 8 is 50% for our guys. So we had 5 or more, but we had over 50% filled on those days. So if captains weren't having to write up into the DC role because y'all equated to like 17% of our shift, that would still put us at 61.5% shift filled with captains, and that's if weren't full on, but we weren't full on captains any day last month. We had 1 or 2 days where there was only 1 guy riding up to the whole 24, but we had no 100% just cap days. So theoretically, if all 3 shifts were filled with full-time captains, we would still have 173 openings a week. So theoretically, this would theoretically put us at 65.1%. Because a lot of guys will look at, and I had this argument again and lost, but the reason I won the argument on your captain's test was when I brought the data, I was like, look guys, yes, I know theoretically if every captain works 3 shifts a week, this is exactly what it's gonna be, and we're square, or we're sitting around that 80% mark. But you can't look at it that way. You have to pull what our actual time and what our actual weeks and the data says from actual stacking. So if we promote 5 more, best case scenario, theoretically, we're gonna be sitting around 75%. If we had 10 more, that's theoretically, but it's about 85 to 90% of the time having to ride up.
How many people are on that?
All said and done, we had, I think, 20-ish, but we promoted 8. If we do, I think we can safely do 5 more. Best case scenario puts us at 75 to 80% of the time. Because I would like to, because we've talked about it, leaving a 10 to 15% buffer for ride up, because that's also good and it kind of encourages professional development and all that good jazz. So,
Well, then it also gets into like the whole, like whenever I get pulled to write up for store ads, that's when it'll drop low.
because something that has still is going to kill us though is the fact that if I it's already hurt us. Out of the 8 guys we brought, 5 were in journal, all 5 of them were drivers.
Yeah.
It's shit, and
That much more.
yes.
All except for Dick.
Right.
Sorry, here in just a few minutes.
There takes time.
Yeah, I gotta send this out, make sure everybody gets and give them time to log in again. And then once they do, we'll get started. Y'all want any coffee or water, Gatorade or anything?
No,
I'm good right now, Chief.
So, and then our response time data was immaculate this month. We had an average response time of 6 minutes and 10 seconds last
On scene.
month. Our average shoot time was 1:13, which isn't bad. That's quick. Y'all and fours are two of the worst, or the worst two for turnout time, but that's easy to justify, and I explain that when they get asked about it consistently, because I expect ones, fours, and fives to have the worst response times
Upstairs coming down.
coming from trailers.
Or coming from the area, huh?
But as far as, but where y'all made up and made one of the best, so y'all average response time was 5 minutes and I guess I can do this,
40 seconds, 45, yeah.
46, which, because y'all's travel time, because y'all's territory is actually pretty small and everywhere you can get to quick.
Yeah.
Pretty reasonably. So y'all actually have one of the best, actually the best response time out of anybody.
In travel time.
So you had the best total response time. Because fours is kind of the same way. There's,
But even still, a minute 25, it's still, that's average.
it's under 90 seconds, and it's almost close to the 80-second standard. So the only reason that 35 says a low response time, and I'll tell you that I know this for a fact, because a lot of guys don't sleep in the trailer, or at least one person sleeps on the couch and they hit the button.
Yeah. See, no one at ones hits the button.
And that kind of bugs me a little bit, but so this was actually, we had 494 responses last month. Station 33 was the busiest, they made 86, 32s made 72, 34 or 82, 34s made 75. This is why I truly think the dual house at 34s is warranted.
That's a lot of calls on a fucking tower.
Yes, but they've changed their mind on that because there's nowhere, because they're gonna have to work on the AC to make that, so.
That's why they said 6s first.
And this is actually our, and I don't have it all on the chart, but I have this year versus last year. We were up 120% from where we were last year. We're at 2,726 calls this year from 2,269. Last year,
How many?
2,726,
Up 500.
yeah. And then if you look at this is from July of, actually, it's July of 18 now, I think, that's where I'm going, yeah. Or January of 2018. We have been steadily increasing these past 2 months. I don't know what's happened to make these past 2 months a quantity to response data. But then looking, this is our 12-month rolling average. And then, so structure fires last month, we actually did pretty good. These were all of our mutual aids. We made territory. And this is actually an oddity here too, because 4 of them were in District 30 instead of District 31.
Yeah, because usually they're 2, 2s or 7.
Yeah, and I hate this number here because this number pisses me off because I don't think it gives a true, but this number is amazing because what throws the percent loss versus percent saved on is when you get outliers like this. So this one was 100% loss. And when you average them out, because we had one that was a 0.18%, a 1%, a 5%, and a 7.93%. But when you average in 100% with that, that drives it all the way up to 22.82. But we saved $1,462,852 worth of property last month, and we only lost 29,000.
Good number.
That's fucking amazing. There was one outlier on the mutual aids that threw me for a loop. You know, we mutual aided South County last month. That threw me off
Because
because
for tanker, right?
or
Actually, Cascade.
yeah,
Yeah. Because they went to that dinner's landing farm.
yeah, that's all in their landing.
They actually made it? Yeah. I'll be right back.
I'm worried, bro.
Yeah, dude, I was actually picking up slime in that area
I heard them on their YouTube, and I'm like, oh, they must be going to a medical call.
Yeah. I think one had everything to be.
That this is the, like, I find this kind of shit interesting now. And then we also, we had an outlier here as well, because we showed a brownout of station 38 last month for 24 hours.
Because of things.
But it was HVAC related, not staffing related, and I made a couple notes of it in a couple places. You know. But this was, I mean, basically it was HVAC related, not staffing. Because that brownout was on the 3rd. Then on the 3rd, we had 27 people a day and 27 people at night. Here's that right. And I misspoke. We had a captain writing of 17.7%. 17.7, roughly 80%. Y'all filled 22 of our shifts, which is going to be consistent until they hire more full-time district chief, another full-time district chief. But once they hire another full-time district, really me moving into admin evened up district chief spots, because it takes from 5 of us fighting for 14 spots to 4 guys fighting for 14 spots. So basically, you're going to get only one guy a week that doesn't get 3 shifts theoretically, if you would say. And I actually added another category to my full-time versus, so my duty crew versus volunteer staffing. So I added in the full-time, and it's actually pretty funny, because so excluding chiefs and everything, but this is also funny yet mildly scary. So, oh, this did not Cool. So, including everybody, volunteers were 14.5%. Time was 3.6%. 3.6, and then 83, we equated to 81% of the department staff, 81.9 to 82. Which is weird.
Mm-hmm. The rescue one.
Yeah, the drivers. So I talked to Mike, and he was a fan of, and he was a fan of this. So the probationary process. So I,
Were y'all, so like, are they having to do full-time, guys can be doing the same task with the video?
so all of their stuff is in here, all the performance standards they need to do, and then I've got it set up for their daily evaluations to go into here as well. You can do everything on one print. Well, I guess kind of you do, but you actually know you don't, because every one of these forms, if I attach the correct ones, which I need to look at, I think I did. Out. If I make this form, if I attach my form buildable version, you can do this on here, on the computer, save it, and then you just go, boop,
Done.
yep. So instead of having to send it in an email, you've got it right here. And then for, if I didn't do that one with my form fillable, yeah, I did. All the standards, my form fillable versions. Transfer. There's one form for children. So yeah, you do this form fillable, upload it, done. And you're logged in showing training.
Yeah, thank you. Isn't, I don't, that's what I don't like about first report, I don't want that I have to build a sheet. I have to go through and input every single one.
On fire rescue one,
No, on emergency reporting, which is where they want us to build them. Like, there's a way to jump in there. I have access to a, building class. It gets it put in there. Applies after.
how would we want to do that when we log training to fire rescue? Okay, let's look at this. Well, credentials. And let's see if you can. So, and originally, I didn't like fire solutions. I like fire solution. But ever since working with Andy and getting to do some of this, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is awesome. But also, I don't want to be fire rescue one cat. because I'm a complete administrator on this program. So. We're just gonna play.
But I have to get.
Yes, they've got an email portion, but I want to.
Not like that one. I have to take that sheet
Mhm.
and I have to copy every little one and paste it. And add.
Do we still have emails?
Maybe most fire rescue one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is how I was supposed to. They told me I couldn't do stuff with it.
Mm. I don't know if I'm doing, I doubt
In the conference room, yes, and then after action, we got it. No. I took the class, state building, I acted for it.
for emergency reporting, maybe.
No, for evals is what it was.
So here's what we can do so when you do things in here, does it log training?
No,
See,
no, this was to build it, so then you can access it through, like you'd have to log in and then administer it through here.
and let's do this because I think whatever we do, we need to be able to log.
I think it should, if we could, and well. All I wanna do is add their probation and firefighter skills
Mhm.
that we have, our task book, or not, our performance standard.
Okay.
So that way they're not papered.
Mhm. Okay.
Brad asked me, or I said, hey, just Miller has to do this firefighter skills, so I don't think so. That's something to give it, that original. Yeah. So, hey, Brad, he doesn't have to do it. Well, I know people that never had it. Good, like Gabby, story. Never listen to, yeah, emergency reporting has its issues. Yes, it does.
So if I can find out how to build, because unless they've got it to where you have to own the evals portion, but because, so basically what I'm looking for is basically this page. To be able to manage them, but it's got, so I'm here on the admin side. When I go to add new, this is only letting you find stuff. Unless I just don't have total rights, which is possible. But I would like, remind me, I'll ask Joe today to make sure, because all I asked is make me a department administrator on the program. Because if that's the case, then I can go in and do exactly what I've done here, and that where I could go.
We're not having a modifier if you want, they go in there, they report, log it, and log into their credential certification.
Yeah, because
Well, I was funny.
yeah, so I can make this based on, okay, look, phase 2 evaluation, yeah, phase 3 evaluation, and I'll make it just like this one.
They're just enjoying the conversation. Yeah, I was reading the text thread.
Yeah, we've been talking fire court administrative, I mean, we're already done class, I mean, really.
I know, man. That's what I'm talking about.
So we're back to the people, okay?
Well, can everybody online hear okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, been one of those mornings, so sorry about the complication. You know, it wouldn't be planning unless somebody threw a monkey wrench in the gears at the last second. So I think we got the problem sorted out. We'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is a rather short chapter in general. And it's on fire inspection and safety planning. So I think there's 30 questions total on the exam. Has anybody taken the exam yet? I hope you haven't. If you have, let me know and I'll reset it if you want to. But usually when I teach the class that day, last class was kind of an exception because I got thrown into that at kind of the last second too. I usually go through the IFSTA exam and kind of do a test review, so that way you guys can kind of benefit from it a little bit by being here and be able to go through your exam without having to look a bunch of stuff up. Because you're not doing that, right? I'm just messing around. So we'll go through the chapter. We'll go through some of the slides. I'm not going to go through every one because there's 120 slides and it's just kind of overkill. So what I'd like to do today, the plan is to go through the presentation, kind of hit the high points, talk about some topics and definitions. If we have time, we might do a collective skill, and then before we part ways, we'll kind of go through an exam review, and then you guys should feel probably pretty good about the test. A little bit on this topic, as far as the state exam goes, it's a smaller section of the exam. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that it's, you know, it's not a lot of information to retain, but the bad thing is that if you miss, I think there's only like 3 or 4 questions at the most on this section on the state exam. It's easy to get a low score in that particular section, but this is not a sectional exam for the state, bear in mind. So it's your overall score on your Officer 3 test. That's really what comes into play. But anyways, So this topic covers a lot of fire marshal's office stuff. So just by show of hands in the classroom, and maybe you guys saying something or entering text online, does your organization have a fire marshal's office attached to it?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody online that does not have a fire marshal's office attached to it?
Aldine doesn't.
Okay. So those of you that don't, you might perceive this chapter more on like community risk reduction. You might be more familiar with those topics, whereas some of the investigation and some of the inspection stuff might be new to you. So if it's new to you, you might want to pay a little bit closer attention to the material. But generally speaking, these are kind of the responsibilities of a fire marshal's office as we're accustomed to it in Harris County. However, there are some organizations that have their staff, their on-duty guys, or maybe they have an inspector that works for the fire department that goes out and does inspections. Inspections is kind of up to the way that your everything okay? Yeah. Up to the way that your organization does it. So we'll talk about some of those differences a little bit and see kind of how everybody does the stuff. So
Yeah, supposed to be on you over there. Oh.
Okay, so let me do a screen share real quick and we'll go to the PowerPoint. There. And I want to go to PowerPoint. Rolling through, there we are there. And PowerPoint slides. Before that, I want to look, there's some skill sheets, okay. So let me open the PowerPoint. Let's go from the beginning. Okay. Oh, so if you'll follow along with me and either, I would suggest as we go through this particular chapter, if you'll, you can use the PowerPoints on screen just to kind of see kind of where we're at, but it would probably benefit you to go through the actual chapter. So as we're going through this, if you'll just kind of follow along the chapter, it'll probably make more sense once you read through it if you haven't in detail. So this is one of the objectives of the class for today, primarily over fire prevention and life safety programs. You can expect that you're either going to see this little Maltese cross on your exam, or you're going to see these program elements on the state exam. So for fire prevention programs consist of basically these 4 categories according to the IFSTA book and the state exam: inspections, engineering, investigation, and education. So real quick, is anybody familiar with inspections? Have you guys ever done inspections?
Yeah.
You do them on the truck?
Yeah.
Ugh, I'm sorry.
We are.
Yeah, just so, but you guys have a fire marshal's office, I guess, so they just primarily do, with your fire marshal's office, they just do investigations primarily?
We supplement them.
Okay.
So with the community growth we've had,
Mhm.
our fire marshal's office is understaffed, so we
Okay.
supplement the inspections they can't get to, and they also do re-inspection.
I got you. I used to know somebody that worked for your fire marshal's office, Paul Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
You remember him?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's working for Montgomery County now. Paul's a really good friend of mine. I worked with him a lot before he moved over to the dark side. So inspections might be a part of your organization, whether you have a fire marshal's office or not, or maybe you do, but the requirements might be through your through the fire suppression division, so to speak. Then engineering, what are we talking about when we get to engineering? Like when they say engineering, what are they saying? Yeah, yeah, permitting and yeah, plans, especially plans examination. If you haven't taken that particular certification course, I don't recommend it unless you absolutely have to have it because it is awful.
Yeah.
Correct.
But engineering does play a role in those fire prevention programs. And then of course, investigation and you know, kind of how investigation goes in the fire service in absence of a law enforcement fire investigator, arson investigator, the ranking officer, the incident commander holds the responsibility to do a preliminary investigation. And that preliminary investigation is basically to determine whether arson is a possibility or whether it's most likely accidental. And then it goes further whenever you get to the fire marshal's office where they're actually collecting evidence and all those sorts of things. And then the bottom of this Maltese cross is education. And we see that in a few different ways. The Harris County Fire Marshal's Office kind of does all of the above, and then they're also kind of supplemented by the individual organizations doing some community risk reduction topics usually. But again, if you have Fire Marshal's Office, then usually they do either all of this or the majority of it. So in regards to the term fire prevention and life safety, it's based on these three primary subjects. The first and foremost that you have to shoot for whenever you're putting together a fire prevention and life safety program is the overall principle is reducing loss of life and property. So you're trying to prevent those fires before they're occurring. You might have heard of what is it, the Junior Fire Starters program, and a lot of other different things that are out there. But overall, that's the primary goal. Secondary is meeting your organization's mission. Do you guys have a mission statement?
Yeah.
Anybody online, do you guys have a mission statement within your organization?
We have one for our fire marshals as well.
Oh, really?
Ours is separated, fire prevention and.
It kind of helps a little bit when they do it that way, it seems like. Especially if you've got, you know, different primary goals, but meeting the organization's mission and then also reducing community risk in general. So you can kind of see how the division occurs, the topics. Everybody is probably pretty familiar with that picture on the bottom left. We do that a million times on the fire truck. And then some of the fire marshal's offices do that as well. Then inspections and code compliance falls under that category, public fire and life safety programs, as well as investigations. So as a chief officer, working under the fire officer 3/4 curriculum, you could be responsible for developing or evaluating an existing program, or like I said, developing a new one. So as we go through here, you'll see that they either talk about a chief officer doing it or a project group doing it. So I guess with larger organizations, maybe they'll form a committee or something like that. It'll be a group project, but the terms are kind of interchangeable depending on your organization. Duties can be delegated to other personnel. Like in y'all's case, like you just said, the inspections could be delegated to maybe a captain or the captains in general. You know, everybody's a little bit different. Chief officers should have working knowledge of programs and processes used to develop them. So that's kind of what we're going through now. And recognizing some of the key governmental roles in that process will be not only helpful on your state exam, but might come in handy one day. So overall, that risk reduction program kind of has some overlapping topics, and that's kind of what they're trying to get across with these overlapping circles, is that you know, engineering and technology comes into play, code enforcement or investigation, education, kind of the stuff that we've just talked about. So these are a couple of different things that might cause problems within your organization to develop these types of programs. Smaller organizations, maybe like, you know, one truck departments or something like that. Obviously, there's a lack of resources that you have to overcome. And then the new construction is also kind of a change in the way that things are happening in the world today, and can also affect codes that are adopted, and then, you know, the way that you do business. So this is, if you're in your book right now, you'll see that there's a part in there that has bullet points that point to these particular topics. Let me see if I can find the page. What was it? 119. 119. There you go. Yeah. So on 119, under needs identification, I've got the book, the edition prior. Does it look the same? So this is what I got. Does it look the same as that?
I mean,
I've got the old one
right here.
Okay.
That's the middle.
So yeah, so on you said it was 119 in your book?
Yes,
Yes, 219 in mine. But anytime that you're going through this chapter and you see these bullet points, pay really close attention to those, because a lot of the state exam questions are going to come from those bullet points or the information immediately preceding those bullet points. I know this, and I'm pretty intimately familiar with that test question writing process, because I'm a part of the ad hoc committee with the state of Texas for all the rescue stuff that's coming out. Hadn't hit the streets yet, of course, but I've taken an active role in writing some of those test questions. Now, I didn't write these test questions, so don't hang me out to dry yet. But I can tell you that on a committee that does all these questions, maybe you guys have had some experience with this too, that a lot of the times, if you think of being a fireman and you've been tasked with writing test questions straight out of the book, the first thing and you have to take your own test, by the way, so you don't want to beat yourself up too bad. So a lot of those questions come from these sections that are bullet pointed. So if there's a list of information, such as the developing and implementing programs, there's a process that they say in there. We might go through it here in just a second. I think we brushed on it briefly, but identify, select, design, implement, and evaluate. Can promise you something like that's going to be not only on your test, but also your state exam as far as this subject is concerned. So not to get off topic too much, but just so when you see this, pay particular attention to it as you're studying for your tests. Taking an active approach to overcome those barriers that we just talked about. For this particular subject, you have to be an advocate for prevention and education efforts. So you have to take an active stance in developing those programs. So when I say those programs, what does that mean to you? What do you identify within your own respective organizations that would be a prevention and education effort? You guys have like I said earlier, a junior fire starters program, or maybe I guess you could consider CERT. So some of the CERT groups to maybe be an off. That's really a FEMA category, but you know, public relations and those types, talking to elementary schools,
Setting up PRs for schools.
Yeah,
Probably our biggest,
setting up PRs for schools, giving them that fire safety speech, right?
especially in October. And
Mhm.
then we also do some stuff every once in a while with some of our nursing homes. And
Okay,
assisted
good.
living facilities.
Yeah,
We've got one of our first dues has 11 in their first due.
that's good. That's good that you guys identified that, because here in a minute, one of the things that we're going to talk about is risk identification. There's a lot of organizations out there that they just kind of like, well, we should do something about smoke detectors and something about fire extinguishers. Well, if you go through your, if you really actually do a needs analysis or a risk assessment based off of your true statistical data, that's what the state and the book says you should categorize it as. So you're headed down the right road with that for sure. Because a lot of organizations just, it seems like sometimes they just do what they feel like everybody else is doing. But really, it's supposed to be a customized program specific to your populations. So support, creation, adoption, revision, and enforcement of standards and codes. You got to stay ahead of the curve as far as some of the codes and laws are concerned. If you're a city, if you work for a city, they're probably going to be a little bit better at this. Usually because they have an attached law enforcement program and attached active fire marshal's office because of municipal requirements. If you're a county organization, it's kind of hard to keep up with some of those standards and codes. We rely a lot on the fire marshal's office. Develop inspection, investigation, education programs based on service area needs, kind of what I was just talking about. So you have to look at your organization specifically to design a program that's most appropriate for your people, whoever you serve. Provide professional development for personnel. So if you have, like you said, high risk occupancies, let's say nursing homes, like you said, maybe we drill a little bit more on fire suppression, running calls in facilities and organizations like that. High occupancy, high risk, that sort of stuff. And then consider development of regionalized and collaborative resources. So working with the neighbors. This is what I just quoted just a second ago. And this is that 5-step planning process for fire and life safety programs. So, so screenshot this, burn it into your brain, identify, select, design, implement, and evaluate. Those are the steps that we're going to go through. So this is kind of where we begin at the identification stage. Like I said earlier, project management teams can kind of be almost completely replaced with a chief officer. So who's in charge? And I'm just going to use you guys because you're here. As far as Tomball is concerned, who coordinates that? Whose job is that? Who does that fall under? For specifically for like project management stuff or like community risk reduction and stuff like that. Fire marshal. So they do most of like the programs development for fire prevention. Okay. That's one way to do it. And then there's a lot of other organizations like the counties that don't have the fire marshal's office attached to it. And then they kind of do like an independent CRR, custom for their population. So as you can see, everybody, this is kind of a moving target depending on where you work. So they're going to provide necessary information for creating the program. Where would we get? So we're doing an identification portion of this planning process, and we're doing you can call it a needs analysis or a risk assessment. Where are we going to get that data from? Response data. And one of the things that I take it a step further because I physically do this here. One of the things that I talk about to some of our students that take this class, if you're ever required to evaluate those programs or creating one of those programs, it's all about the information, right? But one of the problems that people run into sometimes is they get a little off target, not on purpose, but just because they're not really thinking about the data and where it comes from. So you have different types of data that we collect through run reporting. And one is, well, what does the dispatcher say we're going to, right? So the dispatcher says we're going to a fire, right? So according to their data, they're going to categorize that as a fire. But then once you get there, you find out that it's not a fire at all. It was somebody having a party with a smoke machine, and it was really no emergency, no fire whatsoever. So you can see where the data would be different, right? So I always advocate for not the CAD system data, but the true run reporting data, because your guys are going to be a better reportee than the original call.
Talking about like incident type, like no actual emergency at location
Mhm.
versus come out as a fire or residential and it's a control burn.
Exactly.
Dispatch determinants are very broad strokes, our infer ones are more detailed and isolated a little bit better with the report, run
Yeah.
reports on.
So if you have the ability to, I know y'all are talking about some reporting stuff, actually, ironically, right before all this started, according to the text thread.
We were mentally preparing.
Hey, you were, man, y'all were ready to go. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what we're saying here. The book's not going to teach you that, and you're not going to have that question on an exam, but I'm here to tell you that it's going to make a huge difference
For your needs, I think.
for your needs identification, because what the dispatch center says we're going to versus what is actually happening, two completely different things. So you could have a statistic, let's say that you ran 300 fires last year, but in all actuality, it was, 132, because the rest of them were a controlled burn. That's not really a structure fire or anything. Maybe it was a permitted controlled burn, or use your imagination, right? So I'm always an advocate to make sure that you're using run reporting data and not CAD data for that reason. It'll help you with your needs analysis and your risk assessment, because we want to know what's really actually happening, not what people think is happening when they call 911. So when you perform that risk analysis, be careful of where you pull the data. And then select appropriate types of programs to address the needs based upon the most accurate data you can make decisions off of. So I think some of these questions might also be in your chapter. Yeah. So in my book, it's 219. What
120 mid-page.
Okay. So 120, about mid-page, you'll see what are the major fire and life safety hazards in the service area? Where are the high-risk locations in the service area? When are the high-risk times? These are all questions that you would kind of want to ask yourself, and then use that data to answer those questions in order to identify what the risks are and how you're going to address those or prevent them, so to speak. Let's take one of these, for example. Let's say, well, we'll just continue with the example that we did earlier. Where are the high-risk locations? You said one station has how many nursing homes? 11. So like you guys are already planning for, which is good. You already know that threat exists within, and that's just one station's territory. So it's not like a district or overall, it's just that one area. Okay. Are they like around the medical center area? Okay. So that would be a perfect question to ask, in order to find that information. Where are the high risk locations? You said that's station 11, you said? Station one. So in their case, if they were doing a risk assessment and they identify that there's a bunch of nursing homes in station one's territory, then they probably need to proceed, as it sounds like you guys are, do fire safety at those locations, pre-plan those locations really closely, and maybe even do walkthroughs of where do they have a suppression system, what's their alarm system look like, and all these sorts of things. Has anybody ever made a nursing home fire? I know your chief did, didn't he? Something like that?
No, that was
Who was that?
That was Chief Hutton.
Yeah, he said he was working for Baytown at the time, and said that he did that. That doesn't happen very often, but I could imagine. I've never really made one personally that was really a shit and getting fire, but I could only imagine at how miserable that would be. Which have so many different.
the hardest part is evacuation.
Yeah,
This one, the one I made, kind of halfway caught us with our pants down a little bit, because when we pulled up to the facility, they were actually evacuating, and I was like,
they were
I was a chauffeur
by themselves. Oh, okay.
And I looked over to my lieutenant, I was like, hey, dude, this ain't good. They don't evacuate this place.
Yeah, yeah.
And we went in, found it was burning up in the attic.
Alright. Yeah, that's kind of a crappy situation too in the attic, because within the structure, sometimes they can cordon off areas to kind of, you know, contain the fire. Maybe they have fire doors.
Attic is all common space. Follow ours.
Yeah, so once it gets in the attic, that's a big problem. So anyways, so those high risk locations, when are the high risk times? I'll give you an example for that one. When I was working for the city of Humboldt, I was on the truck, rotating through the ambulance and all this stuff. We had a nightclub that was called Motions. And within an 8-month period of time, we identified just on our own run reporting that it was a little over 100 deaths associated with that one nightclub in 8 months, whether it had been they left, got into a motor vehicle accident, or somebody got killed in the parking lot, or somebody overdosed on the back couch of the club or something. But so you can kind of run some reports, data, and find that information.
Between like 1 and 4 a.m.
Mhm.
Depending on response.
Exactly. Yeah, because those nightclubs, they're gonna have odd hours rather than other businesses. And it was only during that time frame, because that's when the club opened, and you could tell as the night went on and people got more and more drunk, it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, when they shut the club down at 2 a.m., everybody was scattering, breaking into stuff. I mean, it was a mess.
You also consider like high peak times, like weekends.
High traffic,
Or
maybe.
high traffic times between 4 and 8 or 4 and 7 around here.
Yep, absolutely. Can also identify some risks as far as we don't have EMS associated with with East Texas Fire Department, but my last department did. And I know that around those hours, like you said, high traffic hours, we were always a little bit more cognizant of transport times, because if we had somebody that, might have been a level 2 trauma and we needed to take them to a level 1 trauma center, we knew that if we went non-emergency, it's going to take 3 hours to get there. That's not advantageous for the patient, right?
Yeah.
So either emergency traffic, or if it was bad enough, life flight. So these are all different considerations that you probably go through in your own mind as it is already when you're on the truck. It's the only thing that we're doing here is we're referencing department-wide data, because maybe you made 15 suicides in a given area, but you just happened to be lucky and you just happened to be the guy that made them all, and there weren't any more. You know what I mean? So we can't do it based upon personal experience. We have to go off of department-wide data. And these are those questions. So needs identification, you can answer those questions, identify problems and hazards. Then you're going to get into the development stage where you're developing solutions, ways to prevent some of this from happening. In my particular scenario with the Motions nightclub place, they actually started staffing law enforcement and the fire marshal's office to literally stand in the parking lot. And that was kind of an edgy thing, because there's some laws out there that say law enforcement's not really supposed to just hang out in a bar parking lot, but they made them staff additional security and things like that. And that helped there at the club, but it didn't help when everybody left. So you can develop some solutions, but in this case, particularly in regards to prevention, but I guess that could be associated with prevention too. A law enforcement presence, if you have that ability. As a fire department, you don't always have that ability, but you guys would, because you're attached to a city that has that division within it. Prioritize hazards if resources are not available. Mitigate hazards in order of severity or frequency. So obviously, life safety over property over blah blah blah. So what questions, do you remember some of them, that we would need to ask when identifying community needs for a fire prevention and life safety program? You can read them out of your book if you want. You could probably, honestly, if you just think about it, kind of just, I don't want to be an ass, not sound like I'm being an asshole, but just kind of logically think about, okay, well, what, yeah, that's it, bro. That's it, seriously.
Simple, and I was
Yeah.
telling man,
That's all it has to be. I mean, really.
don't overcomplicate it.
Because the book has a tendency to make things appear overcomplicated, but really they're not, you know, most of this stuff is really pretty common sense. So if you just think of it from a common sense standpoint, you're probably going to do just fine. People really start to have problems in these classes and tests when they start overthinking it, you know. So yeah, keep it simple. Who, what, when, where, why, you know, who are these groups? When is this risk at an elevated, you know, when is it an elevated issue?
If you have multiple educational facilities, daycares or elementary schools.
Yeah.
Who, kids, when, school time.
Yep, yeah, during regular school hours for the win. Yep, you got it. So that's it. But, and then basically just remember that. So remember the who, what, when, where, why. And then obviously it needs to be a hard source data. It's gotta be, you'd probably be okay with using CAD information for these purposes here, but really if you want to be 100% accurate, you know, that run recording data is probably more apt to be on point. Are there any identified needs in your community that could be positively impacted by our fire prevention and life safety program? Or change that question up a little bit. Maybe you guys are already doing something that seems to be working. Well, anything on that? I know that you guys use the nursing home thing.
I think our fire prevention and life safety program could probably improve, but that's where it goes into the fire and life safety educator, where you have almost like a Jason position, CRR, where you're out in the public. You're, I don't know if y'all saw the other day, Willis did a thing with the constable's office and MCHD, and they sat in a car wearing heart monitor and basically blood pressure cuff, sat in a car, videoed it live with everything shut off, just to show you the effects. I think that was kind of cool.
Wow, that is pretty cool.
Did that
volunteer
a couple years ago. They did a
Yeah.
crew, they sat in the cab of a fire truck.
And
just to show, I think
recorded with that heat exhaust
Yeah.
heat stuff.
and how quick it can happen.
Mhm.
I think every department could probably improve on that. I know we probably need a little, our personal department probably needs a little bit better of a, you know, life safety. Yeah, because we can go out to the school and, you know, teach them once a year in October, and where maybe it should be more involved. And then nursing homes, we have a lot of newer people. I think we need to get out and do nursing home stuff. I wish you could run like a fire drill, but I know it's
Yeah,
kind
that'd
of,
be difficult.
yeah, that'd be a multi-agency task force at that point, I believe.
And we've got really good pre-plans. We're pretty good about keeping all of our pre-plans up to date
Yeah.
and readily accessible.
That's good.
Uh,
What program do y'all use?
So we actually have them dumped into two different spots. We have them in Responder 360, and we've actually, one of our guys figured out how to put them in active 911.
Oh, cool.
So our plugs and some of our target hazards, the pre-plans in there. So you've got the one program, because we all get the active alert when we get a run. I can look at the facility, click on, see the pre-plan.
That's pretty
right
cool.
there.
That way on the way,
Mhm.
you know, you don't have to pull up Responder 360, find the building, tap on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. It's just automatically fed to you. That's pretty beneficial. So yeah. Cool. Program selection. So we've identified some of the risks and hazards, and then program selection. So we're gonna look at what's the best solution for the identified hazard. And then, you know, it kind of from there, it turns into a couple different things. What's most cost effective and what's most achievable. I think sometimes we are highly limited based off of these, you know, what's the best solution for the identified hazard? We come up with a million different solutions,
to solve the world's problems. The problem is we're gonna either run out of money or we're gonna run out of resources, and we only get so much. So the first question, not too bad, but the thing is you really have to be really practical about what those solutions are, how you go about doing it. And then a lot of the times the solutions that you come up with are really spread thin, because you only got so many people that are able to perform those community risk reduction stuffs. And, there's a high demand for it or whatever, and you can only do it so many times a year, like what you're talking about, So for elements to consider for program selection, program recipients, what's the potential cost? What's the potential benefit and available resources? So have you guys heard of cost benefit analysis before? So in this case, it might be good once you come up with a potential solution, what your plan is, maybe do a cost benefit analysis because, maybe it's a high risk thing, but you're only able to reach a very small percentage of the group by what you have available. And then in other cases that might not be as big of a risk, but you're able to make a bigger difference based off of your ability and cost effectiveness for that program. So when you get to this point, and this is where politics and being a chief officer doesn't always make sense to other people, man. Because, here I am in my office and, the guys are on the floor and they're like, man, we keep running this bar and they're killing people left and right. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I see it too, but there's not much I can really do about it, it's, you hate to pass the buck, say, oh, this is a law enforcement problem or what have you, but that based off of your resources, funding and capabilities, like we're better off doing, a kid's fire safety thing because we know we're reaching more people and doing more for those people. So, you get to this point and sometimes the tune changes, and unless you're really looking at that data and you're looking at the money, you're looking at capabilities. A lot of the times when you're on the floor, money and capabilities don't make much sense because you're seeing these things happen. And it's frustrating because I've been there before. I get it.
It's kind of the hard thing, just across the board with everything. You've got to do what you can to make the most impact, whether it's, external or your internal customers. That's, you said, it's an important conversation I've had to have before where I want to work on this. This impacts 3 or 4 people. I'm working on something right now that impacts 100.
Yeah.
I've got to put priorities for what impacts the greater good, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Say you got to start looking at 40,000 foot view, 40,000 foot, or the 30,000 foot view.
Yeah. Our fire chief kind of says the same thing, and based off of the perspective. Sometimes when you're right up on it, it's difficult to see outlying issues and other things, but when you're looking at the picture of the whole, sometimes it starts to come together. So yeah, that's true. SMART. So there's another acronym for you to remember as a firefighter. Program objective requirements: specific, measurable. I say actionable. The book says action oriented. Realistic, and the book says time phased. I say time oriented, but whatever. So SMART. You can probably bet you'll see that on the test question as well. Design and selection. We kind of talked about some of this already. I don't want to beat the dead horse too much, but should be based on specific objectives to address a specific local problem. We kind of talked about that in our conversation. Selecting the most appropriate program may not be simple, like we just discussed. And then those are some of the reasons why that might be the case. School-based programs and partnerships can benefit the community's fire and life safety efforts. We kind of talked about some different school programs that are out there. Teachers are often assigned as public safety educators. On that note, just sharing a little personal experience that at the state level, so for instance, So this, I talked to you earlier about that ad hoc committee for curriculum and testing development that I've been working with for the last couple of years in Austin. And the lady that runs that, she's never been a fireman before in her life. And you would think, you know, like, does that make a lot of sense? But honestly, dude, she's freaking amazing because she knows more stuff about curriculum development, writing test questions, and all these other things. She brought to the table a lot of views and opinions and professionalism that as firemen, we just don't have that finesse when it comes to curriculum development and test questions and all that. She's like, no, if it's going to be a valid test question, you know, it's got to be this, it's got to be exactly as it says in the text and blah, blah, you know. So teachers often actually do pretty well as public safety educators. And I think there's more organizations out there that are starting to put, I'm going to use the term civilians, in those types of liaison positions. And I think they do really well because, you know, they have the views of the public and they're not firemen. And sometimes that's kind of appropriate depending on the circumstance. And it seems like people are starting to find that circumstance is accurate under these circumstances. Anyways. Legal mandates, if you're a city, you're probably going to deal with these a lot. If you work for the fire marshal's office, you're going to deal with them a whole lot. If you're on the fire side and suppressing them, if you're doing inspections, then you'll probably run across them more than others. But unfortunately, there's a lot of suppression divisions out there that the most they get into this is talking at an elementary school or doing a pre-plan. But there are a lot of laws and rules to keep up with. Texas Administrative Code. Are you guys familiar with that law book? So, I got a bachelor's in emergency management from West Texas A&M. One of the classes they had us take was Texas. No, I'm sorry, not Texas. It was administrative law. And I thought, oh my God, dude, you know, it was torturous up front. But in retrospect, looking back, it's probably one of the most beneficial classes I took. And the reason why is because once you get to a point as a chief officer, say you're doing community risk reduction, or say you're doing training and you're the one-man band, you're the show. You're the only person in charge of it. You tell everybody else what you come up with, the ideas and the dreams and the ambitions and all this stuff. And nobody writes a playbook for that. There's training galore out there. Rarely do you ever find somebody other than maybe like a mentor that can convey that information to you, like stuff like, you know, don't use the CAD information, use the reports. Because they figured that out the hard way, most likely, right? But one of the playbooks that does exist that'll help tell you how to do your job and how to keep your department out of trouble is administrative law. And that administrative law pertains specifically to emergency services and emergency management in the state of Texas. So I'm not saying read the Texas Administrative Law book, but if you ever have a question about legal mandates as it pertains to this stuff or any of that, you know, building code is also in here too, but administrative code will help tell you as a chief officer, this is what you have to do. So anyways, in the future, if you get into one of those positions, bite the bullet and at least skim through Texas administrative law, because there's some things that we're supposed to be doing, TCFP doesn't make us do. They could nail us to the wall on a few different things. So anyways, it's the playbook. So try to stay up on the rules and charters and laws and all that stuff, particular to your jurisdiction. Data collection, we talked about data collection a little bit. data based on local, regional, national incident reports. You can get national incident reports from the National Fire Administration. But in this case, I would suggest you get them from the organization that's providing the service. Would be more accurate than a national statistic. But you can use the national statistics to judge. You can compare it, your local to the national, to see, well, are we higher than the norm? You know, are we lower than the norm? What's, you know, where do we stand? So sometimes that's helpful. Use all logical available information to gain approval for establishment of fire prevention and life safety programs. So if you're a city, probably have a city council, maybe you're a mayor council. There's 3 different types of governments in municipalities, but they all strong mayor, weak mayor, council mayor, and all these different ones. But you probably have a council, and that council at the end of the day has to approve every division's budget. And that's where this comes in. For us at an ESD, it's really, I love being a chief officer at an ESD. I would prefer it over a municipality. And it's not because one or the other is better. It's just because when I take, let's say I'm putting together one of these programs, and I take it to our board of commissioners, the only job they have is writing me checks. I'm not fighting anybody else for it. There's not another division or an organization like you guys. You have to fight for your money to, yeah, literally, because, you know, Road and Bridge, Parks and Recreation, and all these other organizations. Like, no. We need people worse than they do, you know. And then it turns into the city trying to make a decision on, you know, who needs things more than others, and that can be difficult. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's worse. I'm just saying it is more work and it's more difficult. There's more politics involved.
But you see more stuff.
Yeah. So in an ESD type form of government, like I said, it's the only job they have is allocating funds and making sure that we're doing appropriate things with their money. And that's it. And the only reason why they're writing checks is for the fire department. They don't write checks to anybody else because it's a district form of government specifically for that organization. So anyways, that approval process is going to be a little bit different depending on what form of government your organization operates under. And then whoever that is, whenever you start having to play those politics games, you have to really build information to justify it. And that can be frustrating because you know that we just made 100 fatalities associated with this nightclub over here. But in their defense, they don't. They just don't know. You know, so it's frustrating that you actually have to tell them that and jump through all these hoops. But in their defense, they don't know unless you tell them. And usually they're very receptive, especially if it's factual, statistical data. You can't argue with that because it's numbers on a piece of paper, it's non-opinionated, you know, and that's the way. So if you're trying to gain approval for establishing, amending, overseeing a fire prevention and life safety program, use those numbers, that data collected to your advantage with your form of government. And then at the end of the day, there's only so much you can control. At the end of the day, they have to write the check or they have to say no. But that statistical data will keep you out of getting into unnecessary arguments and stress and all these different things. So this is the point at which in your career, you're going to have to pay really close attention to numbers and data and all these different things, especially as it pertains to building data for prevention and life safety programs.
You need any of your stuff?
Sir? Can you say that again?
Power, say again.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk to you.
Okay,
Oh,
no problem. You don't want to talk to us?
wow.
Man. Okay, so what factors should a chief officer consider when selecting the appropriate type of fire prevention and life safety programs? There's that bullet point list in your book. That's how you answer that question. Okay. For selection, design, implementation, this is under the program design section of that process. The objective, as it says here, I think this is a pretty cut and dry PowerPoint slide, and I think we've already pretty much addressed this, but develop the most effective means of delivering the program's elements to the public. And then that's based upon your organization. Program design. What time is it right now?
10:30.
Okay, we've been doing this for about an hour. Let's take 5 to 10 minutes, stretch, refill coffee, go to the bathroom, move around a little bit, just to kind of wake up some before we get into program design. And we'll meet you back at what'd you say, what's
10:34.
so let's do 10:45. And we'll start back up. We're probably on track to be out of here.
By 11.
I hope so, but realistically, probably 11:30, maybe about an hour or so.
Oh, so where's coffee at you? I
Uh,
already had a coffee and a monster.
yeah, I know, man. Well, this information is so bland and dry. You know,
I
don't have a lot of coffee.
You're welcome. You smell that sanitizer? All right. Hey, there you go. I'm here to the overtime on some more things. You see, y'all, you got your deposit. Okay, cool. Make sure that. Yeah. He was like, well, yeah. I'll go you that. I remember they have. Yeah. I was in, hey, just picture, so I was there. On the ladder. Are you still at, I heard a rumor you were great today. Was, for a while. Yeah. But that night. We'll be on shift that night before. When I get everything set up.
Love life with that.
No, I'm all for it. Worker that. It's tough to line with, okay. I made a mess up. But you know, more established and fine, your work, it's still great, hear great stuff about it. Just the growing pain, you know, kind of hard to want to make that full time. Now, we did part time helping, I would be testing, do it. Okay. Okay.
Also,
I can show you where
here.
Yeah. What were those things?
Yeah.
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 I can show you, maybe we can. Well, yes, you know, they, and right here. Oh, no, we got. Yeah. That'd be helpful, because I'm looking to rent another. Yeah, one of everybody. Yeah. Not Chandler, it's right now. I looked at that one over in Magnolia. Yeah, guys, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think you said it kind of. I'm not. I just want to wait.
I was there for a year and a half.
No.
I wanted to tell you all.
Yeah, Stacy, I didn't realize how, yeah, I saw how much big jugs of it. And the guy, the guy that made it hard, it's all Amazon, that's all I paying about half anything. And it's just, I think there are a lot of people who have. I know,
Now it's so far.
Okay.
Because I left that,
Working on one. So originally the plan was.
Said, hey, we're gonna park closer.
I've got to make my days.
Yeah.
So I want to try to.
And then it was also in all
They should have gone out, I need to get a whole different. But the inbound, so probably 22. I'm thinking, hey, you got people from the need.
It's like 22 votes left in the month of like 500. I think when I said they're ready to make time.
Okay, yeah, because I'm looking on the snow cone.
And you're looking, I think, 22 jumpers before you go work in the table.
I want to check.
So when all of us.
Too much, you can't tell me, hey, we care about your family, and then turn around and tell me, I want you to hear that. So I was like, well, you know, how does it go? Yeah. Yeah, pay, well, and after the building paid, that's what I was thinking about. Maybe somewhere around 17 with, guys, I think you got to get 18 years. Yeah, yeah. And they pay us $3 less than a brand new rookie. Coming in.
And that was called Martha Sue. She's had a couple of that chest. Not far. It's really, I don't really work with this.
That's big, small.
Yeah, I know what they're doing.
Yeah, good for chicken, rabbit, ducks. Yeah, all the way to,
They'll start off
yeah.
Was expecting you to.
And so, that will be set up for the jump.
You're waiting one for that. Oh, great.
I'm hoping I'm
I walk
ready,
in
good weather.
and then we get
Jumpers will get
MR tanker. The MR tanker and truck.
Yeah, and just dry. Yeah, that's, well, hoping we have good weather.
I'm
I'm trying to look at it.
Yeah, I'm on the MR, I'm making you swim through.
Well, we just need to get you to do that. They put me on that MR shit. I mean, then they put me on there with Yahoo, going to, hey, all 100 miles an hour, and I couldn't even go on the, like, slow down. Yeah, I'm not crashing it.
We're supposed to drive that for some sassy and say.
Oh, yeah.
Drive that back to the station, do actually, or to even get fuel. Like, you should stop, hold 3 seconds at every red light, double check. Yeah, I'm gonna get this in disregard. Yeah.
Well, good to see y'all guys, man. So you have to catch up and get a beer sometime.
Do you live anywhere near us?
No, but maybe on there all the time.
Because you work from Magnolia.
Yeah, well, I get, they're about to fire me if I don't do my minimum.
Yeah. It's tough, and then your tours rotate to the weekends.
These are one way.
Kids are home. Panarakis called me and was like, he's like, well, because when I started over there, I was in the process of, well, I still am. Yeah, I mean, it's a long ass process to get that U start cert through TICS. Well, and I was doing a lot of same stuff, but for to do the pro board for all the rescue crap and stuff now. So I told him, I was like, hey, man, these are week-long classes. I can't meet the minimum and still have to do, you know, baseball. I'm not gonna miss a bunch of baseball.
What's crazy is, I'm Gary, and I'm Brooklyn. They walk in, they walk in, they go, I don't know, it's the night guy, yeah.
Well, he called me, but hey, I'm just calling to tell you that you need to put Magnolia priority number one. I was like, first off, let me stop you right there, chief. I was like, you guys make 17 bucks now, right? That puts you nowhere near number one on my priority. Right? He's like, well, I guess we'll be having this. He's like, well, when I see you next time, I guess we'll be having this conversation. You better hope it's not outside of Magnolia.
Yes, real truth will come out.
Yeah. But well, I'll see you guys later. I know how you guys.
All right, brother, no worries. Comments. Yeah. Damn, get it, brother. All right, guys, go ahead and, we'll go on 33, we're done. Fine, that's,
I'm getting run. I do it. I'll take it here.
Oh my God, you know, they actually do it so here. Oh, wow, this is a shocker right here for me. All right, jump, small increase lateral velocity while jumping. And small reduced to the landing slogan called landing. Oh shoot. Can you give a money? Oh man, hopefully this just it actually does something in because that sounds kind of crazy.
Actually, you don't want to bow. And all the changes, I think I need to change the TikTok.
Just like, yeah, they all.
Or I just made nice with one.
Yeah, I didn't see this, still that area.
Fire rate, exceptional ability, support, locked via the battle pass, and then we also have the Iraq 300, which is 2000, which wasn't particularly good but okay, balance. So we got light machine gun, wrap age, increase semi-auto damage, reduce semi-auto fire rate. So we'll have to look to see if that's above and under at the same time. What the overall net positive is, because with that in mind, you'll get the Chimera, close with the range damage increase, so that got a bump, and then headshot multiplier for the team, which should make it a little bit better. I always had a problem with the team maximum damage decrease, so that is damage. Minimum damage increase, so it actually.
That's fine, he reckons it's bad. That's fine, he reckons it's bad.
That damage multiplier decrease, so they're damage. Upper torso, lower torso, and damage increase. So it looks like the up damage, so basically they did a headshot increase, right? But it's kind of odd. So it's probably gonna feel weaker if they increased all the multipliers. And the headshots though, it's gonna be good. Light machine gun, HCR, the damage multiplier decrease. So they're gonna be more accurate, gonna hit some chest. All MG headshot multiplier increase. It's like up there. And machine guns. MX9 needs a bigger mag, but they decided to do close to the range damage increase, and then got damage.
As long as
Okay. There we go. All right, so, program design. This is very circumstantial. It's gonna be based off of, what type of program you're putting together. But taking into consideration all those other things that we talked about earlier, that'll kind of depict how you design it, what circumstances you might have to overcome and so forth. This could be anything from, you heard of smoke detector blitzes? That is heavily involved. There's tons of people that have to help and do it, and lots of notifications and stuff. It's a complicated process. You gotta have a big buy-in within your organization. Not something that you would just want to do spur of the moment, because a lot of people aren't gonna be too keen on that. But if you can work your way up to it, then hey, sounds great. But it's all gonna depend on the type of program. Program design, jurisdiction has to approve the design, and if you're the chief officer, well, maybe you are the approval process, but one way or the other, the funds will have to be approved in the ways that we talked about earlier. Contingency plan, always have a plan B, not just the case with this, it's the case with everything from technology, whenever you're teaching chief officer 3 to a bunch of people, and everything decides that it wants to fall apart at the same time, to health and safety and program designs for life safety programs. You might have to address personnel requirements, and if it requires money, reallocation of funding, and then depending on your budgeting system, you might have to get some financial approval from your governing body. Different topics in regards to that program design. It helps if you have supportive political leadership. There's a big push in politics right now for community risk reduction. I know Chief Tharp did y'all's class a few days ago. I didn't get this chance to watch the recording. Did he show you some of the different things that he's done at 48? Yeah, some of the different public service announcements and this and that. Some of them are less involved, some of them are more involved. It all depends, like we're talking about, on your organization and how you do it. Should be, especially like if you're doing a smoke alarm blitz, that public announcement is probably going to be pretty vital, because
You don't want to show up.
you don't want to show up. Yeah, it's going to make people feel uncomfortable, and it depends on the part of town too, right? So I grew up in not a great part of town, and if you just show up, start knocking on doors, you're not going to be greeted with a smile, especially if you're law enforcement or the fire department or whatever. You knock on the wrong door, it could be a crack house, you're really gonna have problems. But anyways, so those public announcements can be very appropriate depending on what's going on. Alternatives, community involvement, corporate partnerships and interagency agreements. The corporate partnerships, places like Chick-fil-A, they usually are very pro first responder and public safety. There's a few others, but you can do partnerships, and I know Tharp did a lot of those with the what do they call it, the Touch a Truck initiative or something like that. And you can just kind of play into other corporate programs and save some money. Gets out to everybody, especially the kids, so program approval, once you've developed your particular program, so you've identified the need, you've justified it, you're developing the program, make sure that you have that organizational structure to support the program, everything from the top to the bottom before you hit the go button. Then have those resources allocated to your needs to follow through that program, and provide personnel in the event that you do. Sometimes you might not. If it's a public service announcement, you might just be able to work independently with, there's a company out there that does a lot of media stuff with the fire department. It's called, they're called Bella Media. If you haven't used them before, these guys are a media company, they're a production company. That's what they do. They produce PSAs and all these other things. And and they're really good at audiovisual production. So if you're looking for one to do that public service, that's who we're working with right now for 3 of our PSAs. And they're really good because they already know what to expect. They work with fire departments all the time. So I'm going to spot them in that little advertisement there, but they're really good. I don't get any kickback or anything. So, yeah, right. I'm getting a percentage. Make sure you mention that Brian Luskin told you to come. Time required to establish the program, variable depending on what program you're establishing. Implementation may require creation of a formal organizational structure. So I'll use our training program as an example. When I first got here as a captain, they tasked me with all this training stuff, and there was no hierarchy. And you remember span of control, 3 to 5 in an emergency type situation, maybe a little bit more. And then in a controlled environment, you really can't get past, more than 12 people. But when I got here, we had 100 employees. There's no way for me to manage 100 employees. So you have to develop a hierarchy within the organization to help with that division. It sounds like you guys are a part of something like that with the training division within your organization.
Yep.
So some of those hierarchical, if that's a word, designs have to be implemented from time to time. And that's time consuming. That is really time consuming because there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of people with a lot of different responsibilities. And I'll be honest with you, for that to be a well-oiled machine here, it took really at least 3 years. Because there's a lot of different procedures and processes and things that everybody had to get used to. And if we had a weak point in the chain, then it would hold up the whole process and slow down the machine. So anyways. Just some more considerations. I'm gonna skip through. That's pretty specific. Implementing funding sources, donations, capital expenditure. You remember that from your budgeting class? Yeah. Grants, gifts, operational or program budget. So different places that the money can come from. I think most of us are probably either going to be operating through a capital budget or a operational or program budget, unless you maybe work duty crew for some outlying department. Most of the departments around Harris County are going to be using probably one of those 2 funding sources. Staffing, you guys are all paid professional, right? Anybody work for anybody that has volunteers still online? They're still alive? Bueller. I'm correctly. He fell asleep. Training has to be provided for personnel and new curriculums may have to be developed. So it just kind of depends on that. Again, that hierarchical structure. If people have specific jobs, they have to be trained to perform that specific job. You know how it pans out. New personnel may have to be hired for specialized functions. So one way or the other is you create a position within your organization. If it's an open seat and you're filling it, it's either going to be you filled it with somebody from inside your organization, or it created a trickle down effect that required you to hire more people into your organization. So bear in mind that if you're developing these programs, usually if you're creating a new position, eventually that's going to trickle down to, for instance, if we were to have a district chief here that left to go somewhere else, we would have to put on district chief's test, and then that person would come from the captain's bank, right? And then we would have to have a captain's test because the captain promoted from there, and then the EOs, and then the firefighter, all the way down to, so you can see where, you have to really pay attention to the ripples in the pond. They go way out. So, just if you're for thinking, just be careful with those hierarchical decisions. personnel, all that sort of thing, because it can have a trickle down effect that leads to, you know, having to hold a whole new hiring process. What resources must be considered to determine the cost of a fire prevention life safety program? Well,
Everything.
everything. Yeah, it's simple, it's practical, everything, really. Money, people, hierarchy, span of control, you name it, all the stuff we learn. It's pretty much all applied to program development and management. Evaluation. Let's skip through some of the data monitoring. So we talked about data, types of data, where you would get that data. We've kind of already talked about where those preferable sources would be. Can you guys think of anything else other than fire reports as a data source that you might be able to pull information from? You guys as a city might have more data sources than others. But I'm
Feedback, things like that.
sure, yeah, public, yeah, some of these things right here, like types of data, inspection data, investigation data. Luckily, with a larger organization that has a fire marshal's office attached to it or whatever, you have other people entering different types of reports into a system for pre-plans and all that stuff. So, you know, it's there for your.
Would you be able to consider like, we have a living population of 28,000, but Monday to Friday or even on Saturdays when we have market and events,
Yeah,
would you be able to pull that data from the consensus or whatever it is? Would
Sure.
you see that?
yeah.
That would affect, I'm assuming, how you plan things.
Yeah, the last department, well, I say last department, the last department I worked for was the city of Humboldt, and we had, they call it bedroom population of, was relatively low, like only 18,000 or something. But during the day, with all of the shopping and everything, they estimated that we had an influx of over like 500,000 people or something. So yeah, absolutely. And that might be something, you know, correlate with your risk assessment, needs assessments and all that. General sources of feedback. So now we're talking about, okay, we figured out we have a problem, what that problem is, how we're going to address it, how we're going to pay for it, blah, 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 blah. Now we're trying to find out if we're being effective. So that evaluation process and what they're talking about here, general sources of feedback, is we want to find out now if we're making a difference. So let's say we had I'll use the youth arsonists program as an example. Say you got a lot of kids in the area that are setting fires and this and that. And then you start a youth fire starter program at your elementary school. You can then go back to your run reporting data and find out, oh, okay,
There's been a fluctuation.
there's been a trend downwards, or maybe it's getting worse or whatever. And that'll help you find out if what you're doing is effective. And that's part of that evaluation process. For all of those. Accurate evaluation depends on clearly defined outcomes. So that's going to be those data sources and statistical locations for run reporting and incident reporting, accurate fire cause and identification and reporting. So I guess it's what they're basically getting to here is good information in, good information out, crappy information in, crappy information out, right? So, and if you have a QA/QI process on your run reporting, you're going to have a better outcome that's more accurate. Whereas if nobody's doing QA and then people just fill out reports however they want to, you're probably not going to get the accuracy that you need for these evaluations. So you're only as good as the data that you keep. Acknowledge success of the program, its participants. I would, if it's beneficial, man, preach it to the rooftops, especially to the politicians, because they want to know that the dollars they're spending were used effectively and it obtained a result. And And they'll be happy with you, maybe even give you more money. It also help you figure out if any revisions might be required, changes to the system or the program, or maybe just continue the program entirely. Maybe the outcome was something that just really wasn't cost benefit analysis really worthwhile. So, all right. Fire inspection programs. We talked about that. Analysis, kind of resource implementation. We talked about that. 5 steps. Collection and design, inspection, division, and reviews. We kind of talked about that a little bit in the implementation. It's just the only major change is that instead of it being a fire and life safety program, the inspections aspect of it are just kind of making sure that those are done. And then it can be done, you know, based off of like you guys do, where it's, you know, the captains or on-duty staff, or maybe it's a true inspector that does that all day. That's all they do. Depends on your organization. So if we were to prioritize inspections, what do you think would have the highest priority?
My life hazard.
Yeah, life hazard, high occupancies, assemblies, assembly locations, institutional locations like schools, stuff like that. So those are going to hold priority most likely, because if something happens there, it's going to affect more people. This is kind of the stuff we just talked about: healthcare, institutional, residential. When they say residential, what do they mean by that? Because it says residential, and when you say residential, you think of people's houses, but that's not what we're doing, right? Apartment complexes, maybe townhomes that are interconnected, they're part of one building, or yeah, multi-family dwellings, right? We talked about assembly, special hazard locations, maybe like this building on the right here. They're storing maybe some jet fuel, different considerations to be taken for different places. Fire codes, local ordinances, those sites are inspected annually, especially if there are high life safety issues. Some places only do inspections based off of certain criteria. So I've never seen it before, but apparently there's some organizations out there that only do inspections when a complaint is lodged. Whatever, but I don't think that's going to work very well. But nonetheless, that's what your book talks about. So but obviously with building and fire code changes, do you guys have something in your jurisdiction where, like, I know in Harris County, if they remodel or there's a loss to the structure greater than a certain amount, then they have to basically redo the whole fire system and code.
Yeah, but they're grandfathered in if nothing happens, right? But if like metal's burnt down.
I believe it's
Yeah.
if they are doing a remodel or a rebuild that is over 50% of the
There you go.
value of the business,
Yeah.
then they're required to be compliant with current fire code.
Yeah, I think that's an adoption of some of the national fire codes, and most cities and organizations, counties usually adopt that 50%-ish number. So you know, food for thought. If you make a high occupancy building and you have, you know, a 50% or so loss, you can bet that you're probably going to have to come back and inspect that again if they rebuild it, and they're going to have to be up to code. So, you know, they might have to add a fire suppression system, sprinkler systems, FDCs. They could require a lot of different things. But these are all the different reasons why inspections might be initiated or might be done for some reason or another. Plans review, like I said, don't ever take the class. It's horrible. I would not recommend it. It's one of the hardest classes I've ever seen.
On the hardest test. Great.
Did you take it? I've never taken it personally, but I've seen it.
We both got it.
Oh my goodness.
Ours was looped in all in one, inspector one, inspector two, and plans examiner.
Wow. So you had to take all those? Oh my goodness. That is, I'll take any class, any test. I don't care, whatever.
Except that one.
Except that one. That one, I mean, even arson investigator, not really so bad. In fact, I was kind of interested in parts of it. But that is really bland material.
Yeah.
Really hard to remember all those parameters and numbers and whatnot. So
And then, like you said, like I had a separate book that was all building codes and
Mhm.
code enforcement, and I'm like, oh, I don't know any of this.
yeah,
I would
It
10
is.
times, I'd rather do 10 pre-plans than one inspection.
yeah.
But my pre-plans are even different than what they suggest. Mine's like walking it, getting to know it. I don't need to write down all the MSCS sheets,
Mhm.
contact. I would rather just walk a crew. Okay. Yeah, what we need to look at.
Mhm. Yeah, kind of like walkthrough.
Luckily, our deputy fire marshal, he is in charge of plan reviews. And building codes and all that, and then, or our assistant fire marshal, sorry, and then our deputy fire marshal is really in charge of all the inspections. So,
Yeah.
we also do ambulance inspections too.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Like all the transfer services and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they have to have a permit to pick up or drop off? To pick up?
Just like the use permit.
Gotcha. Fun time. So what do you have to do for that inspection? Just make sure they have fire extinguisher and this and that, or what?
Basically, we've got a checklist
Okay,
that we go through. It goes through,
what all's on the checklist? I'm just curious.
basically, there's DOT stuff, there's emergency light stuff, making sure everything's working, there's making sure they have their copies of protocols. If we're certifying them as like an ALS unit, we look at all the drugs, make sure everything's in date. And then it's,
What does that permit cost? Just out of curiosity.
that it's not much.
Not too bad. So they just make an appointment, they come by the station, they go to the fire marshal's
They
office?
make an appointment. We've been picking up some extra slack initially, or because before that wasn't something we did, but just due to some personnel problems in the fire prevention division, we've been having to pick up and help with that as well.
Gotcha. Lucky y'all.
I love River City, it's great.
No, man, yeah, like I said, I did it for a while and it is a different animal than working for the county for sure. In some ways, it was a good thing. In the other ways, it was kind of, I think I could have left it, but anyways, yeah. Okay. I think these are kind of a given. This is talking about personnel and code enforcement. All in all, for building code enforcement, you know, you should already know that you have inspectors, plans examiners. So they submit the plans, they have to be reviewed usually by the fire marshal or one of their trusted plans examiners people. They go through to make sure everything's within code for the city. Then they give them certain things that they have to do. Then an inspection occurs afterwards. The inspection can be done by the fire marshal's office or the fire department, depending on who has that responsibility. But all in all, the process is very similar. It's just kind of who does it is what changes as far as code enforcement goes. So let me ask y'all a question though. So if you did an inspection on a structure and they were deficient, what was your procedure from that point forward?
We let them know they had 30 days to correct it, and then we would forward it to the actual fire prevention
Okay.
Side,
So
and they would go
at the
back.
fire
and do-
marshal's office?
Yeah, the fire marshal's office they would go back and do the re-inspection, because that is, if they hit it twice, now there's fines and fees.
They're
They
gonna write a
didn't-
ticket and all that stuff.
And they didn't want us doing that.
Yeah.
It's bad enough with us doing inspections, but they want us to, so it kind of helps the operation side of the department keep face, because at no point are we the ones ever writing citations for anything.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see where that might be a problem. I guess it's already bad enough when you show up and they're like, oh, are we having another inspection or something, you know? That's probably already bad enough as it is for y'all.
Fortunately, most of our people were pretty good, because we had a guy who, he was very proficient at it and stayed on top of it. And so whenever we would go and do a re-inspection a year later or whatever, it was
Cool. You guys cities are gonna be a whole lot more involved in that process than most of the county folks. So examples of occupancies that should be regularly inspected,
commercial, residential,
commercial.
daycares,
High occupancies, daycares, high life hazard locations,
restaurants.
special consideration, like if they're storing highly explosive materials or jet fuel or, you know, whatever. Violations, like you said, it's usually passed off to the fire marshal, law enforcement officer to actually do the enforcement side of it. And the jurisdiction, whatever it is, has to approve of whatever that process is. Usually enforcement I've never heard of it being on the fire department side of things. Usually it always gets deferred to the fire marshal's office for enforcement purposes if there's too much of a problem. There's National Fire Code, and most of those are model codes. And unless you're in Canada, like it says here, but usually what most organizations do if they're adopting fire and life safety investigation, inspection stuff, they usually adopt the national standards or the model codes and then make changes or deviations from that model code based on the requirements of their municipality or their county based upon their needs. The building department is also usually involved if it's a municipality. They can be done at the request of the owner / occupant of the building. So, because sometimes it's somebody that's renting the structure that has to make the changes versus the actual owner of the building. But anyways.
Now, you can't get on to the manager when they just work there. You just have to say, hey, let the owner know.
Yeah, they have to put up an exit sign over the front door or this or whatever.
Repaint the
Yeah.
fire lane.
So model building code just helps provide standardization of codes and helps make code enforcement a little bit more standardized. And that's what the purpose of a model building code would be. Inspection program. I'm going to minimize this and skip forward a little bit. What page are we on in the chapter right now? If you were to put a page on it,
131.
how many pages are left in that chapter?
To halfway through 133,
Okay,
page and a half. Well, 2 1/4.
all right. He's having coffee and a smiley face. Let's do. Here we go. So I need to minimize this. There we go.
Hey,
Scroll down. The implementation. Oh, that was only
2 slides.
2 slides away, wasn't it? But you can bet that that's probably going to be on there. This right here. So, again, that's kind of like some of those bullet points in the chapter. So pay particular attention to that. Establish timeline, determine resources, create organizational chart, assign tasks for implementation. So you'll see a lot of common things between the under implementation. between fire and life safety programs as well as inspection programs. They kind of word it a little bit differently, but the principles are all kind of still pretty much the same. For the most part. Appeals process. In the event that the owner or occupant believes that that maybe what happened to them that isn't within the law or code, they have the opportunity to appeal their deficiency to a board of appeals, and most places have to come up with a process for that. I mean, usually they're not very successful because I don't know of many places that would really actually issue a citation for something that's not truly within the building code, but I guess it's possible. So how is the inspection program structured in your jurisdiction? It's going to depend on whether you're a county, city. It's really going to depend on what form of government your organization operates within. So evaluating an inspection program. Is it this one? Use fire percent. There we go. Okay, so there's only 82 slides total. So we'll finish this one and then we'll do the test. So from current, okay, so this section should be the last section in the PowerPoint and probably last few pages in your book. Talks about monitoring and evaluating a need for revisions within your inspection program. So there's different ways of evaluating and providing revisions depending on the outcome. So again, it needs to be fact-based decision making. It needs to be based on reports, statistics, non-opinionated usually, and then if a revision is necessary, they might have to change that within the city charter or within local laws or ordinances. So all of that should be taken into consideration. And then also the public needs to be made aware in some shape, form, or fashion. And then, like it says here, an acceptance process may result. So amendments to fire protection and building codes. Make sure you're collecting the necessary data. The amendment needs to be written with input from residents and stakeholders. So I don't really know what that would look like. I've never really seen that before personally. So I don't have a very good grasp on how to explain that to you, to be honest with you. But I would think that it would be probably in some sort of public forum, maybe a council meeting open to the public or something like that. Obviously, the legal department would need to be involved because we're talking about changing laws, charters, and circumstances. With you guys, have you ever gone through a code change that included something like that? I never was either at Humboldt, so I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah, for us, the code's the code.
And they don't usually change it very often.
No, unless the only time we change is if we're going to a new standard.
Okay. And then I guess the final process, and this would be formal presentation to jurisdiction's political leaders, so that way that they can adopt the new standard. Talks about lack of resources, depending on what the amendment or the change is. It could affect training, or training may result. So that way all of your inspectors, all of your investigators and so forth are aware of the code change. So that way they can take that into consideration during investigations and inspections. You might have to hire additional personnel if it's a major change that affects a ton of occupancies. then you might have to hire somebody part-time just to get caught up with inspections. Depending on how big your city is. They could also alter work schedules to provide additional coverage and man hours to accomplish in compliance with the change through inspections, seeking grants or gifts as a possibility, or alternative inspection programs, so changing the way that facilities are inspected. So what are some different potential outcomes of evaluating an inspection program? One would be, it doesn't change at all, right? It's effective, we're not doing anything. Another would be, maybe there's a compliance issue that needs to be enforced. Maybe it doesn't result in change, but we need more people to focus more on a specific issue. Or maybe it results in some sort of code change within your city or your jurisdiction, and then all the process that ensues from there. So that's the chapter as a whole. Depending on your experience with that particular subject, you might have to read and study a little bit more than others. But like I said, try not to overthink and don't recall exactly what the book says. I know you have to do that for your test. But when you get to the state exam, usually it's the answer that makes the most sense. You know how our tests work by now. So don't try to get caught up in too many of the details. Again, if you pay close attention to these bullet point sections in your book, I think you'll cover probably 70% of the questions that they might ask.
That's all I need to pass.
That's all you need. So,
You can't disappoint yourself.
yeah, you're always happier with your results. So I'm gonna pull up the test real quick. We'll skip over the skill part. Let me move it to a thumb drive. And I'm gonna put the test on screen. And together we will go through the test, answer some of the questions. Like I said, there's 30. Then after that, you did it. And we'll just see you guys again next week. It's gonna take my computer probably a minute to boot up because it's super slow. Oh, and by the way, for everybody that's here, I found that the easiest way so far to manage the attendance stuff is just manually. I don't know if I'm gonna do that again. It was the way we were tracking it through IFSTA was kind of a new way of doing it. I was kind of just wanting to see how it would work, but I'll just manually input it. But I haven't done last week, and I haven't done this week yet, but when I log in later, I'll do both of them. So you can use your book, obviously, while we're going through this. Until we get there, let me ask you guys a couple of questions, and then you can kind of find the page and answer the question. So we'll do that a couple of times until I can pull this up and transfer the data over. Okay, so you remember at the beginning of the chapter, there was that Maltese cross that had 4 different topics that covered fire prevention programs. Name those 4 different topics that are around the outside of the Maltese cross.
Engineering, inspection, investigation, and education.
Yep, you got it. Okay, so I'm just gonna read this off and then you can finish it. In your book, following that, there should be, it says, in my book, it says the terms fire prevention and life safety describe a proactive approach to reducing the loss of life and property, meeting the organization's mission and reducing community risk. These programs are composed of what? It's 4 different bullet points.
Pre-incident plans, inspections, code compliance, investigations, public fire and life safety education.
You got it. Did you have 5?
Just 4.
You had 4? Okay. Oh, yeah, that last one had like a few. Okay. Because like I said, I got the whole book. In my book, it's right here, but like I said, I got the whole book. Still loading. Okay. Moving on, while investigation occurs after an incident, it is included as a function of prevention because it can provide vital data that can be used to do what? There should be 4 bullet points for, I think it's actually 5 different things, but it's 4 bullet points. Can you name them or find them in your book?
What was the question, Peter?
So in the book, it says, while investigation occurs after an incident, it is included as a function of prevention because it can provide vital data that can be used to what?
Modify unsafe behavior, influence legislative actions, modify codes and identify trends.
Yep. 1.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm moving the actual test over right now. Being, okay, I got it. Whoa. Okay. Okay. So this is actually your test. The questions could appear in different orders. But again, it is actually your test, so. All our IT department needs to activate all this stuff. Big screen there, so we can see. You guys alive online?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. I just want to check on you, make sure everybody
Yes,
was.
sir.
And take a par real quick, make sure everybody was alive. Okay, screen share. Find the document here.
You select that document at the bottom.
Yeah, we can just do that. There. Okay, so the questions, when I click this little bar, this little arrow here, it'll give you the correct answer. And it looks like they're all already open, but that'll work anyway, whatever. Okay, so Okay, so question number one. Step one of creating an inspection program is to conduct a or an blank to gather raw data about a service area's inspection needs. Risk analysis. Let's do number two. Without, well, I guess it's gonna make me show you all like the test answers, huh? Let me go through and close them and we can make it a little bit more sporting.
Normal check.
So I tried to get as many of them wrong as I could. So that way it would show the checkbox in the wrong place. Some, however, some of them are correct by accident because I just randomly selected them. So don't go off that too much. Get to that one. Well, yeah, what's up?
Hey, you free September 8th, month to dugout, okay? For, birthday.
Okay,
Yeah, so just let me know.
all right. I will.
Okay, September 8th.
I'll text you.
Okay, we'll do.
Thanks,
All
bud.
right.
Back in the house. I think I got most of them. For the first one. Yeah, so we already did the first one, didn't we? Okay, so question number two. What step of the fire and life safety program involves developing the organizational structure to support the program? What do you guys go with?
You probably evaluation.
Evaluation. Let's see. Implementation.
What's that P?
Yeah. And I tricked you because I accidentally got that one right, huh? My bad. The effectiveness of an inspection program can be identified by, well, that's gonna be hard to see, isn't it? An increase in the number of personnel required for the inspection program. A decrease in the insurance rates for all occupancies and hazards within the jurisdiction. I don't think so. An increase in the number of incident calls that are extinguished within the first 30 minutes of arrival, or a decrease in the number of fires in commercial buildings compared with pre-inspection fire record. And it says a decrease in the number of fires in commercial buildings compared with pre-inspection fire record. So why would that be? The effectiveness of an inspection program. We're talking about the effectiveness, right? So we're talking about, we're talking about a positive effect. So if we created a program, did the program, and now we're looking to see if it's effective, if it's being effective, that decrease in the number of fires in commercial buildings should be a positive or beneficial reflection.
You'll adjust your Zoom on that Word document.
Yeah, do you know where I need to? Oh, yeah, right here. Let's try to move out. Do that, and maybe I can move. I'm gonna just minimize this bar.
And you should be
There we
able to put that bar up and out the way too.
This one?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll move it over here. That way it's out of the way. Okay, that's better. Okay, so we did 1 and 2. That was 3, so we said a decrease in the number and then that was correct. During an inspection, the inspector should refrain from talking to the owner occupant, criticize the owner occupant, make statements only on items that need to be corrected, or make positive statements regarding the conditions whenever appropriate. Yeah, D, I think, is the right one as well, and yes, that is the correct answer. Question number 5. Which would be an indicator of the effectiveness of an investigation program. Decrease in intentionally set fires, yeah, that might be. Increase in the need for investigation personnel. Increase in the necessary budget for investigation, or decrease in conviction rates for intentionally set fires. I think I'm going with A. I think I accidentally got it right that time. Yep. So decrease in intentionally set fires. And the reason why is because that would be an improvement as an indicator of the effectiveness of an investigation program. Does that make sense? Let me back out again because this one's. What number are we on? 6. Hard to get all these on one thing. Let's see if I can. I'm trying to move this.
Go up just a little bit more. Grab it maybe.
Yeah, I was trying to grab it right there. Aha! There we go. That'll help. But 3 is done, 4 is done. 5, 6. Reduce the 6. The frequency and type of inspection an occupancy receives is impacted by funding, personnel, training, and equipment, fire codes, local ordinances, and organizational resources, unsafe trends, economic initiatives, and organizational synergy, or public awareness, community acceptance, and open communication. The answer is fire codes, local ordinances, and organizational resources. Seven. What is the objective of the design step in the development of a fire and life safety program? So we're talking about the objective of the design step. Decide whether or not personnel incentives should be added, develop capital budgets that will allow for additional expenditures, determine which elements are necessary to meet the needs of the program, or list justifications for the fire and life safety program that come from the community or political leaders. Any guesses? How about somebody online? Anybody got a guess on that one? How to,
C.
well, what'd you say it was?
C.
C? Yeah, determine which elements are necessary to meet the needs of the program. All right. The next one, question 8. If no revisions are required for a fire and life safety program, the program should be revised anyways, so it is updated. Should continue without monitoring and evaluation. I think we can eliminate both of those. Has proven successful and does not need to be funded, or has proven successful and does not need to be monitored. Again, the question is, if no revisions are required for a fire and life safety program, the program should or has been proven successful and does not need to be monitored, or has proven successful and does not need to be funded. Well, if it's successful, funding's got to continue, right? So I'm thinking that if it's proven successful and does not need to be monitored, well, we're not monitoring anymore because it's proven to be successful. Even though you would think that you still need to monitor it.
Yes, because what's successful this year may still not be successful next year.
Right.
I think
But
that question regardless, but I think they're looking for details.
yeah, so I think the most, here's that word, most correct would probably be D, but I think that's a bad question. Should continue with monitoring and evaluation, but that's not an option, is it?
We may have missed.
Oh,
we misread
I
it.
misread it. Okay, should continue with monitoring and evaluation. That makes more sense. Okay. My fault. I misinterpreted the question. Inspections and code enforcement programs were created because of fires that resulted in negative publicity, the need for mutual aid, high life or property loss, or increased insurance rates. Yeah, I think C is the most correct. Let's check it. There it is. And yep, high life or property, yeah, high life or property loss. See if I can hide that one real quick. When implementing a fire and life safety program, personnel responsible for fire suppression must not be required to attend or present programs. Nah, may have supplemental duties assisting with the program. That's a possibility. Must not participate because these duties are not part of their job descriptions. That might be true at East Tech Fire Department. I think I've heard a few people say that.
The whole answer to that is other duties assigned.
Yeah, I mean, that's not my job. Must always be paid overtime for their efforts toward program implementation. So which one do you think is best?
Overtime.
Overtime is best for sure. But I think may have supplemental duties assisting with the program. Let's look. Yeah. That's the one. 11. What fire and life safety program development step depends on the ability to accurately monitor the program elements? Design, evaluation, identification, or implementation? Evaluation. And it's evaluation. Question 12. Specific fire and life safety program objectives should be broad, open-ended, easily attained, or action-oriented. I'm going to say action-oriented on that one. And it is. Okay.
That was one of the smarts.
Yeah, that was one of those mnemonics. Those mnemonics always wind up in test questions. Every time, it seems like. Uh-oh. I lost my question. I broke it. Why we can't have nice things. You should always breaking stuff. Okay, we did that one. Okay, the next one is 12.
That's one we just did.
Specific fire and life, yeah, there is. So we need 13. This is 13. What indicates whether a fire and life safety program needs to be altered? rate of employee retention, results of the evaluation phase, presence of positive news stories, or results of the implementation phase. Let's say D, right?
B,
And
that's very top.
I think it's D. Again,
Evaluation.
yeah. There you go. Okay, next question. Which is a component of fire and life safety programs? Residential structural attack, inspections, code compliance, hazardous materials response, or personnel medical evaluations? And the winner is inspections and code compliance. 15. What is used to identify the needs of the service area when creating a fire and life safety program? Flow chart, Gantt chart, gap analysis, or a risk analysis? What is used to identify the needs of the service area when creating a fire and life safety program?
Risk analysis.
There you go. Risk analysis. 16. The chief officer can find more information about the minimum requirements for code enforcement, plan review, investigation, and public education operations in NFPA 1001 or 1730 or OSHA training standards or local community response plans. Everyone didn't say anything about the NFPA standards, did it? I didn't see any. So it's NFPA 1730. Okay, 17. Once a fire and life safety program is approved, it should be publicly announced, sent to employees for approval, sent to legal counsel for verification, or implemented, then publicly announced. So it's just publicly announced. All right. Written blown up,
Another meeting we're avoiding right now.
are they done?
No, it's an all day thing.
Oh my goodness.
So we have to leave here and go straight to there.
Man, well, you're welcome to use me as an excuse as long as you need to. Question text. What must the owner occupant do when requirements are made by an inspector? Request a hearing, close the occupancy, notify the insurance company, or comply with the requirements?
Comply.
Yeah, that one's pretty common sense. Comply with the requirements.
Good old Brown.
Mm-hmm. 19. If resources are not available when developing a fire and life safety program, hazards must be addressed in the order in which they occur, prioritized and mitigated in order of severity or frequency, managed according to the department's goals and objectives, or randomly mitigated as to not favor one type of hazard over another. Any takers on that one? I can say we probably eliminate D there. Addressed in order in which they occur. No,
B.
I think it's gonna be B. Yep, prioritized and mitigated in order of severity or frequency.
I will pass, bro.
Yeah. 20. What situation might require an inspection to be made? Occupancy use changes, business hours are changed, New inspection personnel are hired, or increase in revenue for the inspection department.
A.
Occupancy use changes is the winner. 21. Oop, back. When might spot inspections be conducted? During budget negotiations, when personnel have extra time, when personnel are being trained, or during high load or special events. Probably that one, huh?
Mhm.
Yep, during high load or special events. 22. The authority to perform inspections is found in national standards, federal regulations, the jurisdiction's fire code or local ordinances, or the jurisdiction's policy and procedures handbook. It's not going to be the policy and procedures handbook. So which one of these three do you think it is?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Mhm.
Good old Charlie.
Hey.
Charlie is the winner. Okay. What can a chief officer do to proactively attempt to overcome barriers that challenge fire prevention efforts in their community? Require all personnel to be trained as fire code enforcement officers. Support the creation, adoption, revision, and enforcement of standards and codes for the community. Work with other community leaders to support political candidates that are in favor of increased code enforcement.
Obviously.
Yeah, issue code violations to any resident in non-compliance so that community members will take notice of potentially harmful situations. I already got it open here.
I think it's B.
You got it.
I'm
good at.
But he sounds fun.
You got it. Kudos for paying attention. Come on. One more. There we go. Question 24. For the community risk reduction element of emergency response to be effective, it must be coupled with
C.
you got it, other community risk reduction elements. 25. Oh, you got that one too. Model codes. How they all open? I thought I closed them all. Maybe I didn't close these. What provides inspectors with a set of standards to use when evaluating the safety of occupancies? The answer is model code. Which community risk reduction element reduces risk through the creation and application of codes, laws, ordinances, and regulations? So education, enforcement, engineering and technology, or economic incentives or disincentives.
MP.
That's kind of an interesting one.
Because education enforcement. go
Yeah.
hand in hand. It's not really enforcement until you're. Punitively.
Yeah.
My opinion.
I got you. Okay. Amendments to fire prevention and building codes involve the jurisdiction legal department because labor management must be involved. Probably not. They require a change to the law or ordinance. Probably so. Organizational funds must be moved for the changes. Maybe. Or community members must be involved in accordance with open meeting laws. So the correct answer is they require a change to the law or ordinance. 28. What is an alternative solution if a jurisdiction does not approve the creation of a community inspection program? Ask community members to create an ad hoc program. Ad hoc means as needed, by the way. I don't know if that or not. Stop all inspections and appeal to the state fire agency. Appeal to owners or occupants to inspect properties themselves, or provide voluntary inspections at the request of owner occupants? Correct answer is provide voluntary inspections. 29. Justification data for fire and life safety programs can be gathered from personal testimonials, national fire incident reports, organizational capital budgets, or computer hardware and software. Most correct is probably going to be national fire incident reports. There you go. Although you'll always remember my opinion, you should probably use your incident reporting system is going to be the most accurate.
I mean, really, it's deep.
Yeah, really it is for that reason, really. But
Because
because it's a state test or because it's a test,
Mhm.
that's the answer. So yeah, because really our computer hardwares and softwares is what's going to hold our incident reporting data. But yeah, I hear you. Question number 30. The first step in developing a fire and life safety program is to identify the most influential candidates within the community, best solution for the identified hazard for local hazards, most significant local hazards, problems, and concerns within the area, or most effective means of delivering the program's elements to the public. What is the first step in developing a fire and life safety program? And it is to identify, what do you say it is? C, most significant local hazards, problems, and concerns within the area. Got it. Okay, so that should be the end of your test. So now you're prepared to do a great job on your exam. Does anybody have any questions? Let me look at the chat here. Yeah, okay, all right. Does anybody have any questions on anything on this chapter that I can help you answer, or the class in general? How are we doing? Let's, before we dismiss everybody, what's the state of the union right now? What's happening with us?
Yeah. Probably. We're starting to get sections done on our project, at least for our group. We're putting everything together right now. Just waiting on a couple sections to get done and put everything together. I know you are. Budget is hard. Correct. You finally.
Budget does suck.
Yeah.
He was able to transfer something from my PDF to Word document for me.
And if I had time to ensure that, I would have cleaned up both of them before I sent them to you, but because they transfer horribly. And pay attention with that Excel, because it's always good.
All right, everybody online, are you guys, Raymond, I know you had some questions and I'm going to contact you after class to discuss those specific questions that you had. Does anybody have anything? Yeah, you guys were on the same group. We had 3 groups. Is anybody having any problems?
No problems with me.
Okay. If you guys run into any problems, just be sure to let me know as early and as soon as possible. The more time we have to help fix problems, the easier it'll be on everybody. I know it's not the most entertaining and funnest thing to do in the world, but you know, try to do as much as you can between now and whenever. Don't wait till the last minute. I don't have a problem with you using somebody else's project or whatever, but here's the catch. Whenever you do your skills, you're gonna have to know
The skills.
you're gonna have to know the skills, and you're gonna have to understand what your project was written on. And so what's gonna happen is there's gonna be a few different skills instructors that are sitting in front of you. you're gonna give your presentation. And hopefully you're setting up your presentation categorically or whatever, and then you can present certain aspects of it. And then it's possibility that one of those board people for the skills exam might ask a question pertaining to your department or your project. So you do need to know your project well enough to be able to kind of answer some of those questions on the fly. Do I care if you use somebody else's project that happened years? I'd prefer you do it on your own, obviously. But if you use bits and pieces from other places, that's just fine. You just have to you have to know what you're doing when you guys as a group step up in front of that class.
Yeah.
So however you come about it, just make sure that you know what you're talking about when you get up there. So but otherwise, I'm not going to ding anybody for using existing information from your organization or whatever organization you're writing your project on. I'd prefer you do that, actually.
I'm gonna
It'd be better that way.
I'm gonna find a budget from like 12 years ago, so it's not as much easier now.
Yeah, now, that's a good point too.
Oh, we were volunteers then, it's okay. We got no money.
That's a good point too, because it all has to mesh, right? So if they say, if you say in your project that, personnel benefits are of one of your priorities, but staffing is primary volunteer, that's not gonna mesh.
Yeah.
So just make sure that all the parts and pieces line up and it flows, and you know how it flows. Because that's really what we're looking for in the skills, is looking to see if you guys collectively have really thought about how that department's gonna function and what your plan is. And that's the whole idea for Officer 3 and 4 for that matter. So. Real quick on Officer 4, if you haven't sent me an email and you want to be an Officer 4, please let me know ASAP. This group of people has the opportunity to take that class for free. I'm not going to charge you. However, I am about to put a flyer together and I'm going to charge other people. Okay. So you got lucky, you got in on the ground floor, and I'm going to continue as what I told you I'm going to do and give you that class for free. But I've got to charge enough to break even. So if you see a flyer floating around with our information on it and all that, and it's got a number on there for tuition, just know that doesn't apply to you. But also, if you want to be in that class and you haven't told me yet, please let me know, because I'm about to have to file all that paperwork with the state. So kind of one of those speak now or forever hold your peace sorts of things. I can always remove you from the roster if you're not sure. So if you're not sure, tell me.
You can't, correct.
He's not allowed to back out for.
Oh, I got you. But if you think you want to take it, you're not sure, but you think you do, it's okay. Just tell me you want to. I'm going to put you in the class. I can always drop you later, but there's only a certain amount of time that I have to add you to the roster. So if you haven't done that already, let me know. Does anybody have anything else? Go to the order. Like I said, if y'all need to, you can use me as an excuse. You just hang out with me, drink coffee. I'm fixing to go outside and smoke a cigar. You can chill with me if you want.
Resting, just one.
Yeah, hey, there you go. Okay, this is all recorded, and I will edit it down to edit out, all the dead space and everything within a couple of days. Once I'm able to do that, I'll send it out to you guys. So in the meantime, text me if you need anything. I appreciate you guys being here, and stay safe until next week.
All right, I'll catch up with you later, Chief.
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
Thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir. Deuces.
Oh, no, my shady rays.